All right, everybody, this is Pastor's Point of View number 219. Today is July the 15th, 2022. My name is Dr. Andy Woods. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I'm back with my friend, colleague, fellow elder, associate pastor, Dr. Jim McGowan. And Brother Jim, welcome. And we're here in Houston in mid-July. It's trying to survive the heat, but all things being equal, I think we're doing okay.
Thank God for AC.
Because we're doing better than the people in the tribulation period will be doing. That's for sure.
I like perspective.
So we have something to be thankful for. In fact, Brother Jim, I would say this: many of the things that are happening right now will be happening in the tribulation period, just on a larger scale.
Right.
But a lot of the things that are happening right now, pre-tribulation, pre-rapture, in real time, I think are going to be replicated in the tribulation. Because I'm of the view that the tribulation period is not something that just comes into existence in a vacuum.
Right.
There are prophetic trends in place that will be intensified by the time humanity drifts towards the tribulation period. And so in this prophecy update, let's talk about some of those trends. Here is the outline, as time permits, that we're going to try to work through. And let's start with the nation of Israel. And let's talk about Biden's trip to Israel, which is taking place as we speak. We have this quote or this article from the Jerusalem Post, July 13th, 2022, by Tova Lazaroff. It's entitled, "Biden's East Jerusalem Visit Boosts Palestinian Authorities' Claim to the City." And then it quotes some congressmen. "The initiative to try and sway Biden not to make an unprecedented trip to visit the eastern part of the city was spearheaded," and it mentions a politician there, Representative Beth Van Dyne, I think is how you say that, of Texas. And basically what's happening is Biden is planning his visit to the city of Jerusalem in such a way that it coincides with the Palestinian narrative.
Yes.
That the city of Jerusalem doesn't completely belong to Israel.
Right.
So he's accommodating their narrative.
Yes.
Do you mind reading just the underlined part from this article?
All right. Well, you just read that first line, I think, there. A visit would be viewed as a continued sign of continued support for the Palestinians in their illegitimate efforts to claim East Jerusalem.
Now, here's a statement from someone I mentioned before, Representative Beth Van Dyne, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of Texas. She is someone to keep your eye on in terms of being a force for good, because she was, before she took this position as Congresswoman, she was actually the mayor of the city of Irving, which is just not too far from, it's like a neighboring or adjacent to Dallas.
Yes.
And the Muslims in her jurisdiction were trying to bring in their own court system. As you find in Islam, they try to build a parallel society within the host culture.
As they've done in London.
Yes, as they do almost everywhere they've gone. And here's a case where they were bringing in their own judicial system and having their own court for their own issues. And she came in and says, you can't do that.
Right.
You're under American law.
Yes.
And I've always had a great deal of respect for her once she went that direction. In fact, I sent her an email, thanking her for doing that.
Yes.
And here she is in the news again, trying to talk President Biden out of a trip to East Jerusalem, which would harmonize with the Palestinian view of a divided city.
Yes.
So if you continue reading there.
Okay. Representative Beth Van Dyne of Texas.
You pronounce it Beth Van Dyne.
Well, it's D-U-I-N-E. I'm not sure
okay.
what it is.
I think it's Beth Van Dyne, but
between the two of us, one of us got it right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Anyway, she says it's seen as a nod in the U.S. acceptance of the Palestinians' right to have their capital there. Former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, wrote in an open letter that such a visit would symbolize support for the PA's efforts to divide Jerusalem.
See, and this is what was such a big deal with the Trump embassy move.
Right.
The American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, is Trump was recognizing that Jerusalem is the capital of undivided Israel, going back 3,000 years to the time of David. And so Biden making a visit to East Jerusalem is trying to undo the Trump narrative.
Yes.
Which the Trump narrative we think is the biblical view.
Right.
And he's going back to a divided Jerusalem. And this trip that he's having here is designed to, reinforce the Palestinian presuppositions. Why is this prophetically significant? Because the Bible in Zechariah 12 verse 3 makes a prediction. And what does it say there?
All right, Zechariah chapter 12 verse 3, reading from the New American Standard 95 Update. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it.
So who's coming against Jerusalem in the last days? All the nations. Wouldn't
That's
that
right.
include the United States of America?
It would.
You have a similar prediction a couple chapters later in the book of Zechariah, chapter 14, verses 2 and 3. You can read just verse 2 if you don't mind.
All right, verse 2, Zechariah 14, verse 2. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city.
And you have a similar prediction in the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 2, which says,
Joel chapter 3, verse 2, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land.
So not only would, according to Bible prophecy, these ancient predictions indicate not only would all of the nations be gathered against the city of Jerusalem in the last days, but again, it says there in Joel 3, verse 2, all the nations will be involved in a project that will take God's land, the land of Israel, and divide it.
His land.
His land. And all, because people wonder, where is America in Bible prophecy?
Yeah.
Well, there's where it is.
Yeah,
It's part of the all.
Mm-hmm.
And this recent trip by Biden to harmonize, to make a special visit to East Jerusalem, to specifically harmonize with the Palestinian narrative of a divided city, is setting the stage, is it not, for the fulfillment of this prophecy.
Moving us in that direction.
Now, I don't have this in the notes, but in Pastor's Point of View number 216, we talked about an article from the Free Beacon where the Biden administration now is putting the infrastructure, and I think this was picked up by Israel 365 News, is putting into place as we speak the infrastructure to undo the embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem by Donald Trump.
Right.
And we don't think these things are good. We don't think these things are right. We don't think these things make any sense from the vantage point of our nation trying to gain God's favor.
Right.
But we're reporting them from the perspective of things are right on schedule.
Yes, sir.
Things are not falling apart, they're falling into place.
Amen.
Because Bible prophecy predicts all of the nations coming against Israel to divide it.
Right.
Not just to divide the land, but to divide the city. And the Biden administration is doing a great job cooperating with Bible prophecy. Would you not agree with that?
Totally agree.
All right, with that being said, let's go to our second category, and this is the GOG-MAGOG update. And no doubt our viewers will be familiar with this map here. It basically is talking about the nations predicted in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that will invade the land of Israel in the last days. And let me just highlight three. We have Turkey as one of the invaders. That would be Meshach, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah. And if you need documentation on this, why we think this is so, in terms of identifying these nations, get my book, The Middle East Meltdown, or dial into our Sunday School series that we're sort of wrapping up here at Sugarland Bible Church. by the same name, Middle East Meltdown. So one of the players is Turkey. Another player that will cooperate with Turkey to invade Israel is Russia, or Rosh, most likely spearheading this attack. And another player there is Persia, or Iran. And this is a group of nations that we refer to as the Big Three. In fact, you'll look at a picture of the three of them there together. The leader of Russia, the leader of Iran, and the leader of Turkey. Now, this picture here, it might be a little dated because I think the leader there in the picture is Rouhani. And now Iran has a new leader named Rossi, I think is how you pronounce his name. But it's the same idea.
Right.
And so when these three show up together, you have to think Ezekiel 38 and 39. Because think of the statistical improbability of all three of these nations that formerly were friends of the West, turning against Israel in the last days.
Yeah.
And as they're turning against Israel in the last days, cooperating with each other.
Yeah.
Think of the statistical improbability, if not impossibility, of this scenario coming into existence. And yet that's what the prophet Ezekiel predicted would happen 2,600 years ago. And I would say we're seeing the stage being set for this very thing.
Amen.
In fact, we have this article from the dawn.com, but you can find it virtually anywhere. I think it was the AFP that reported on this content, and the title of it is Putin, that's Russia, to meet with Erdogan, or Turkey, and Rossi in Iran to discuss Syria.
Yeah.
So Putin, I think this is coming up Tuesday, if I have my dates correct, is going to meet with the leader of Turkey, the leader of Iran. They're meeting in Tehran, Iran. And they're meeting to discuss Syria, which is on Israel's northern border.
Yeah.
And Ezekiel predicts an invasion coming from the north. And so there's just a brief paragraph that we have highlighted here, but what does that say?
Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet his Turkish counterpart Tayyip Erdogan and Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi to discuss Syria during a visit to Tehran next Tuesday, the Kremlin said. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said three leaders from the three guarantor states of the Astana process, designed to find a peace settlement in Syria, would hold a trilateral meeting.
So there we go, a trilateral meeting amongst the big three in Tehran to discuss Syria, which is on Israel's northern border. Does it seem, Brother Jim, as if things are accelerating or decelerating?
It does, and if I can just make a quick comment as I look at that picture you put up,
Yes.
you know, what's fascinating to me, it's almost mind-boggling that you have Russia, which would be considered an atheistic nation, is in bed with Iran, which is a deeply religious nation.
Yeah.
Because they both hate Israel so much.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Israel is the little Satan.
Yes.
That would make the United States of America the great Satan.
We're the big one.
Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Right.
And some have called this the green-red axis.
Yep, that's right.
The conglomeration or cooperation between Islam and communism for world conquest, world domination.
Yeah.
Which means rolling over any power that doesn't share their values, like the little Satan Israel and the great Satan the United States of America.
Yes, sir.
Now, if all of that weren't enough, Brother Jim, we have Russia and Iran. Their alliance is growing. You'll notice this article from NBCnews.com, July 12th, 2022, from the Associated Press. It says Iran set to deliver armed drones to Russia, the White House says. Quote, our information indicates that the Iranian government is preparing to provide Russia with up to several hundred UAVs, including weapons-capable UAVs, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said. It's sort of a lengthy article, so we're just going to read the first sentence there. But what does that say?
The White House on Monday said it believes Russia is turning to Iran to provide it with hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles, including weapons-capable drones, for use in its ongoing war in Ukraine.
So here is Russia as they've invaded the Ukraine, or Ukraine, I should say, and they need drones. And these aren't surveillance drones.
No.
I mean, these are military drones.
Right.
And who does Russia turn to for help here? They turn to none other than Iran. And by the way, folks, think about this for a minute. Once Russia finishes using these incredible weapons-capable drones, once they finish their work, so-called in Ukraine, who do you think they're going to turn those drones on next? I mean, no doubt they're going to turn them ultimately on Israel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Israel, when you look at a map, is basically in between, or Ukraine, I should say,
Yes.
is in between Russia and Israel.
Right.
So as Russia is moving down from the north, which is what Ezekiel says is going to happen, she's going to keep moving down, eventually getting into the land of Israel. So whatever weapons are accumulating from Iran, eventually those very weapons, we believe, are going to be turned against Israel. And so this is the kind of article that shows you the hostile intentions
Right.
of both countries, number one. And number two, how well they're cooperating with each other, almost like hand in glove.
Yes.
And what would you add anything to that?
No, I just think it's fascinating that one of the side effects of this Ukrainian war is just what you were pointing out, is that as soon as they conquer the Ukraine, well, the right next door is Israel.
Yeah. You just kind of keep moving
You just move south.
down north. And my goodness, I just can't think of... It just seems like the Ezekiel 38, 39 invasion that we've been talking about for so long is just becoming more and more crystallized as every second elapses.
I agree.
Let's go ahead and move here to our third category, Brother Jim. As Biden is sort of acquiescing to the Palestinian divided Jerusalem narrative. As the GOG-MAGOG scenario becomes more and more credible, we have more and more voices calling for the New World Order.
Right.
We know there's a New World Order coming because of the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 23. What does that say?
Daniel 7:23, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it.
This is the final form of Gentile rule before Jesus returns.
Yes.
And it's very clear it's one world totalitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
This form of governance will encompass the entire earth, it says. And so that's one of the clearest passages that we have in the Bible speaking of the New World Order. And we have this exchange that went on.
Yeah.
And this has been all over. You can track this down on YouTube or wherever and find this. But it was basically an exchange between a CNN reporter and an individual named Brian Deese, who is sort of a Biden surrogate. And he just comes out and reveals the goal of a new world order. Just what does the Bible say? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
That's right.
And so remind us of that exchange.
All right, the CNN reporter says, what do you say to those families that say, listen, we can't afford to pay $4.85 a gallon for months, if not years? And Brian Deese's response to that was, this is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand firm.
Not just the world order, but the liberal world order.
Yeah, I love how he titled that.
So here's CNN asking an intelligent question.
And that's an amazement.
And that's an amazing thing in and of itself. And they're asking, how long do you think people are going to put up with this pain at the pump as the price of gasoline, in the midst of inflation, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, is accelerating? And basically this Biden surrogate's answer was, too bad.
Just get over it.
We've got something bigger in mind here.
Yep.
And the bigger agenda is the liberal world order. Now, what does he mean here by the liberal world order? What I think he means is we are intentionally, just like Marxism teaches, redistributing the wealth, I should say, throughout planet Earth from the richer countries to the poorer countries.
Right.
And that's what this pain at the pump that Americans are experiencing, quite frankly, is all about. And we're not going to let our foot off the accelerator until we get this done.
Yeah.
Now, unless you understand that this is what they're doing, the decisions that these politicians make will make no sense to you, because we vote for them to protect national interests. These people aren't concerned about national interests. They're concerned about global interests.
Yes, that's right.
In fact, towards the beginning of Biden's term, here's a graphic or a picture. And why don't you go ahead and read what that says, if you could?
Yeah, just the title kind of says it all, doesn't
Yes.
it? Biden clears way for Russian pipeline after blocking Keystone Pipeline in the U.S. The Nord Stream 2 deal will transfer Russian gas to Germany via a pipeline running under the Baltic Sea.
So no pipeline for America, and that's why our gas prices are going up, I would argue.
Yeah.
And think of all of the Americans that lost high-paying jobs on that Keystone Pipeline. Just go work at McDonald's.
Well, that was basically what the advisors from Biden said. They just let them go find another job.
Yeah, as if a six-figure salary job is that easy to find.
Or jobs in general.
Jobs in general. So they don't want America to have a pipeline, but Putin gets his pipeline.
Yeah.
Now, why would they make that decision? Well, they're redistributing the wealth. They're building what Deese said, Brian Deese, the liberal New World Order. There's an article that goes all the way back to 2011 where Obama was criticized for doing this very thing.
Yep.
It's from the New American. It says Obama commits American support to Brazilian oil after trying to shut down American oil companies operating offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. So it's just a paragraph. What does that say?
Following the infamous British petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, the Obama administration took the opportunity to target oil companies and American workers by issuing a moratorium on offshore drilling, hurting American workers and costing American oil companies millions of dollars. Why then is the Obama administration helping Brazil to expand offshore drilling?
Obama was doing this in 2011.
Yeah.
And keep in mind here, folks, Biden's term is what I would call Obama's third term. I think that's why Biden was selected. I mean, here's a man who's obviously going into cognitive decline. There was just a picture of him shaking the hand of the air in his recent trip to Israel. He can't even, I mean, you're a bicyclist. You should maybe show up there and help him with a few things. I mean, he can't even, be upright on a bicycle without falling over. Here he is walking up and down the stairs leading to Air Force One, falling down over and over again. I mean, it's obviously that this man is very infirm. He's obviously a puppet. And at some point you say, well, who's pulling the strings?
Right.
If I was going to guess as to who was pulling the strings, I would think Obama is pulling the strings. Yeah. In fact, there's actually footage of Obama and Biden appearing at gatherings amongst these yuckity-yucks elites, and everybody wants to shake Obama's hand, and Biden is kind of sitting there in the background being ignored. So obviously what's happening here is this is Obama's third term. So what Obama was doing in 2011, no offshore drilling for American companies, oil companies, but it's okay for Brazil.
Yeah.
What was he doing? He was redistributing the wealth into the New World Order. That's what Biden is doing when his surrogate is asked, how long do you think Americans are going to be able to put up with pain at the pump? His answer is, well, who cares? We've got a bigger goal here. Our bigger goal here is wealth redistribution into the New World Order. So they obviously have a global design for what the world is supposed to look like.
Right.
Now, that's sad from a nationalistic point of view to think about, but that's what Bible prophecy said would happen in the last days. We should expect this kind of thing.
Well,
Would you agree?
America is the thorn in the paw of globalism.
Yeah,
And the only way that you can get globalism is you have to diminish America.
that's
and
right.
this is how you do it.
That's right. That's why no pipeline, Keystone Pipeline, but Putin gets his.
Exactly.
No offshore drilling for American oil companies, but Brazil gets theirs.
That's right.
And how long can we put up with pain in the pump? Well, you better toughen up because it's going to be here for a while.
And it's going to get worse.
And we need to do that. We need to keep the foot on the gas pedal until we finally move into our liberal New World Order.
Right.
Almost a direct quote from a Biden surrogate.
That's right.
So, hello, New World Order. We're being pulled into it, whether we like it or not. By the way, all of this business about, let's shut down the Keystone Pipeline, does that not contribute to inflation?
Absolutely.
Too much money chasing too few goods, inflation, where the purchasing power of the dollar is shrinking.
Right.
So, but we're all getting raises, Brother Jim. Well, are we really getting raises? When you get more money in your pocket, but that money purchases, fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer amount of goods. It's not really a raise at all.
No, it's not. No.
We're all becoming what socialism wants us to be, equally poor.
Equally poor.
And we just got a report. Now we're in the inflation section of our presentation, Roman numeral 4. This comes from CNBC.com, written by Jeff Cox, July 13th, 2022, where it says inflation rose 9.1% in June, even more than expected as consumer pressures intensify. In fact, this 9.1%, I would say, is a very conservative number. I think the inflation rate is probably much higher. But it's just a brief paragraph. What does that article say?
Shoppers paid sharply higher prices for a variety of goods in June as inflation kept its hold on a slowing U.S. economy, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported Wednesday. The inflation reading could push the Federal Reserve into an even more aggressive position. The increases marked another tough month for consumers who have been suffering through soaring prices for everything from airline tickets to used cars to bacon and eggs.
So people look at inflation and they don't really see it as a biblical issue. But if you understand Bible prophecy, inflation, which I don't think is just going to happen, ex nihilo, something out of nothing in the tribulation. The world is already being prepared for it.
Right.
Inflation is going to move into what we would call hyperinflation in the tribulation period. And where are we getting this from? We're getting it from the third seal judgment in the book of Revelation. Here's our chart basically showing what we believe is the order of the tribulation judgments. And we think that the seal judgments are going to happen towards the beginning of the tribulation period. But you'll notice this slide here, it says the first 6 seals. So Jesus is in heaven opening a 7-sealed scroll. Seal number 1, the Antichrist comes forward, conquering and to conquer. That's the rider on the white horse. Seal judgment number 2, war breaks out. And then you have seal judgment number 3, which is famine. And that's described in Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6. And when you see that described, it's a description of inflation. Actually, hyperinflation.
Yes.
So what do those verses say? Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6.
Revelations chapter 6. Let me say that again. I said Revelations. That's wrong. Revelation 6, 5 and 6. When he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." When
it says do not damage the oil and the wine, some people trafficking in luxuries, the elites, won't be affected.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
As always.
As always. The people that are really hurt with inflation, which is a thief, it's one of the greatest thieves around when your purchasing power is disintegrating. The people that get hurt are people on a fixed income,
Right.
middle class, lower middle class, even upper middle class. We're all hurt by it. But the elites, they always seem to, all the people without their masks on at baseball games and their elite gatherings, eating in these very opulent restaurants.
Yes.
They're not hurt at all. That's
Right.
my understanding of do not harm the oil and the wine. But there's a note here from the Charles Ryrie Study Bible describing a denarius and what it was worth in Greco-Roman times. What does he say there?
All right, quoting on Revelation 6:6, he says a denarius is a Roman silver coin that had a normal purchasing power of 10 quarts of wheat or 30 quarts of barley. 1 quart of wheat was the daily ration for a soldier. Thus, a daily wage will buy food for only one person who will have to share with his family.
So a denarius used to buy 10 quarts of wheat, now it buys one,
That's right.
according to Revelation 6,
Yes.
verses 5 and 6. A denarius used to purchase 30 quarts of barley, now it purchases 3 with sealed judgment number 3. So the monetary values of the earth are reduced to 10%, if I'm reading this right, of their original purchasing power.
Hyperinflation.
And that's describing radical hyperinflation. So this inflationary pressure that's going on right now, which is exasperated by not only the government running the printing presses, but also the nixing of the Keystone Pipeline, which pushes which destroys our, domestic oil supply and energy independence, and makes us dependent on our enemies, for our fuel.
Yeah.
Like Saudi Arabia, for example. That plays a role in inflation also.
Yes.
And so these inflationary pressures that we're now seeing, this thief called inflation, this is actually a biblically, prophetically significant issue, which is paving the way for seal judgment number 3.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just thinking also that when you add on top of that the influx of millions of people who are crossing our borders,
Oh my
who are
goodness.
taxing our current economy, well, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah. By the way, Brother Jim, I think it's sort of strange that, well, I'll tell you what, let's not go into that because I want to go into it in another show.
We'll save that for later.
We want to keep things moving. Let's go here to number 5, apostasy. Because as all of these prophetic signs are materializing, sometimes we miss the key sign that's supposed to take place prior to the rapture, and that's the doctrinal disintegration
Yes.
of the professing evangelical Church of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Paul, many, many times towards the end of his life, makes this prediction, not the least of which is 2 Timothy 4:3 and 4. What does that say?
2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 and 4, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires, and will turn away their ears from the truth, and will turn aside to myths.
See, 1 Timothy 3, verse 15, not in the notes, but it talks about how the church is the pillar of truth.
Yes.
That's God's design for the church. As the end times progress and as we get closer to the end of the age, don't expect the church to be standing on truth anymore.
No.
And so we have this article here from the Telegraph by Gabriel Swirling, if I'm pronouncing that right, July of 2022. It concerns the Church of England.
Yes.
And it says there is no official definition of a woman. That's the Church of England talking. Comments provoke criticism, with England's first woman priest saying she is not totally happy with Bishop in Europe's answer. This is just a quick paragraph. What does that information from the Telegraph say?
The Church of England has said that there is no official definition of a woman. Adam Kendry, a lay member of the General Synod, the Anglican Church's legislative body, posed a written question. What is the Church of England's definition of a woman during the July 8 through 12 meeting of the Synod? In his response, Dr. Robert Innes, the Church's bishop in Europe and chairman of the Faith and Order Commission, declared there is currently no official definition of a woman. Quoting, "There is no official definition which reflects the fact that until fairly recently definitions of this kind were thought to be self-evident, as reflected in the marriage liturgy," close quote, Bishop Innes stated.
So they can't figure out if there's a formal definition of a woman or not. Isn't that like attacking God in his word on page 1?
Yeah.
Because Genesis 1 verse 27 is very clear on the subject of gender. There's no ambiguity. And it's reiterated in Genesis 2:24.
Genesis 1:27, non-ambiguous. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. In Genesis 2:24, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.
So there's no official church definition of a woman, meaning God is wrong on page 1 and page 2 of his book.
Well, that's what happens when you do away with Genesis.
There you go. And of course, Jesus seemed to like the book of Genesis because he kept quoting from it.
He quoted from it all the time.
He's asked about the issue of divorce and remarriage, and he quotes these exact passages that Jim just read in Matthew 19, verses 3 through 6. What did he say there?
Matthew 19, 3 through 6. Some Pharisees came to Jesus testing him and asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all?" And he answered and said, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate."
So in verse 4 of Matthew 19, Jesus is quoting Genesis 1:27.
Yep.
And verse 5 of Matthew 19, he's quoting Genesis 2:24. The Pharisees wanted to get him into a dispute between the rabbis.
Yes.
Jesus wasn't interested in what the rabbis were saying.
Nope.
He was interested in what God said at the very beginning of divine revelation. You'll notice that Jesus uses the expression male and female.
Yes.
He uses the expression man. He uses the expression father, mother, wife.
Yes, he does.
So when the Church of England comes along and says there's no formal definition of a woman, they're saying the Bible is wrong in Genesis 1 and 2, and Jesus was wrong when he quoted that section of Scripture.
Well, if the Bible isn't your authority in the first place, what are you left with?
Yeah, and maybe part of the problem is, if I read this article right, it talks here, what is the Church of England's position? And it talks here about a woman in a place of authority over the church.
It does.
Now, that would violate 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 12. And we're not saying that women have no role to play in ministry.
Of course not.
Women have a vital role, but the place of leadership is reserved for a man.
That's what the Scripture says.
So if you're going to ignore 1 Timothy 2:12 and you're going to ignore Matthew 19 verses 3 through 6, and then you're going to ignore Genesis 1 verse 27 and Genesis 2 verse 24, why do you call yourself a church?
Amen.
What are you a church of?
Well, you don't hold to the Old Testament, and you don't hold to the New Testament. So what do you base your church on?
Well, why would people show up to a church like that?
Ignorance.
So they've got to rally around some other cause that has nothing to do with Scripture.
Well, they want self-help.
Yeah, and this is what Paul said would happen.
It's exactly what he said.
in the last days.
Yes.
Now, we have an article here from I believe it's the Spectator.com, .org. It's written by Mark Devine. Now, this is a secular publication, and it's calling out evangelical elites, and he defines the elites within evangelicalism as sort of the evangelical industrial complex, and they're the ones that control the institutions that the sheep finance.
Yes.
That would be the seminaries, the positions of power within journalism, maybe like Christianity Today, which sometimes I call Christianity astray. That's what he means by the evangelical elites. Mm-hmm. And this is a secular publication calling out evangelical elites for their liberalism in the area of politics. Mm-hmm. And the title of the article says, Evangelical Elites Betray American Patriotism. That's just one item in a growing list of antipathies that separate the evangelical industrial complex from everyday evangelicals. And so it's sort of a lengthy article, so we're just going to read a few excerpts from it. But notice here, this section here, underlined, it says since 2016.
Before I read that, let me give a definition of this word antipathies.
Yes.
Because if you don't know what it means, you'll miss the whole point of the article. Antipathy is a deep-seated disdain or aversion to something. Mm-hmm. So these evangelical elites are saying in this article what it is that they are have a deep-seated disdain or aversion to. So let's see what they have to say.
And in fact, their aversion is so overt that a secular organization has to call them out on it.
Isn't that the truth? And here's what this part of the article says. I encourage you to get the whole thing. Since 2016, the evangelical industrial complex, isn't that a wonderful name, has been careful to deliver two messages in and around national elections, the 4th of July, and whenever Donald Trump's name pierces the national consciousness. Here are the two things. One, conservatives who vote Republican are flirting with idolatry. And two, America was never a Christian nation. Independence Day marks just one in a growing list of antipathies that separate the evangelical industrial complex from the everyday evangelicals who subsidize their salaries and the institutions they control. These same elites said that evangelicals would have to deny their faith to vote for former President Donald Trump. They mocked deplorables, that's you and I, deplorables who might lose their jobs should they shun the COVID-19 vaccine. They opposed a bill in Louisiana that would have abolished abortion. They urged evangelicals not to celebrate the reversal of Roe v. Wade. They charged champions of a secure border with xenophobia. They said critical race theory and intersectionality can help us interpret the Bible. They joined in the hysteria over January 6th, but fell virtually mute as the nation's cities burned in the summer of 2020. They said evangelical churches should provide safe places for the same-sex attracted to tell their stories.
So basically, these evangelical elites are taking left-wing positions on all the hot issues of our day.
Exactly.
Remember, it was Christianity Today that came out and endorsed Trump's impeachment. He's been impeached twice, and now they're trying to impeach him a third time, so to speak, with this phony
kangaroo court
January 6th thing that's going on. So when Christianity Today came out and did that and endorsed impeachment number one, I'm like, why are they getting involved in that? What does this have to do with Christianity? Right. But this is how the evangelical elites, the evangelical industrial complex thinks. And essentially, they want you to believe that 4th of July is idolatry.
Yeah.
And America was never founded as a Christian nation. And the leader of the pack is a guy that we had on the screen a little earlier, a name you should know, named Timothy Keller.
Yeah.
Timothy Keller. Now, my friend Brandon House, in his book Marxianity, on pages 28 and 29 talks about this man, Timothy Keller, and what has influenced Timothy Keller. Timothy Keller has been influenced by a school of Marxism called the Frankfurt School. And what does Mr. House say here?
Keller appreciated the ideas of the Frankfurt School. Others have noticed the same worldview emanating from Keller. Researcher Timothy Kaufman published an article entitled Workers of the Church Unite, the Radical Marxist Foundation of Tim Keller's Social Gospel, in which he exposes Keller's position, quoting.
And now he's quoting this gentleman by the name of Timothy Kaufman.
Yes, quoting, "There is one high-profile Marxist who is particularly effective at repackaging Marxism for a Christian audience. But due to his ability to disguise his economic philosophy, he is largely falling under the radar. That Marxist is Tim Keller, pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. It may come as a surprise to his conservative evangelical readers that Tim Keller's recent book, Every Good Endeavor, Connecting Your Work to God's Work, is simply a recapitulation of the Marxist theory of alienation, and that Keller's solution to the problem of alienation is indistinguishable from Marx's. It will surprise his readers to know that Keller's theories of wages is derived from Marxism. It will surprise his readers to know that when Keller recommends modern examples of churches that implement a Christian economic ideal, he identifies churches and organizations that are thoroughly Marxist and are inspired by leftist Saul Alinsky, the author of Rules for Radicals, close quote.
So here's the evangelical industrial complex, headed by Timothy Keller, promoting the agenda of the left as an evangelical elite. And yet Tim Keller is the one who's actually been influenced by the Frankfurt School of Marxism. And according to this article here, and to find that article, you can find it in what's called the Trinity Foundation.org. Here this particular author is saying virtually all of the things Keller likes you can find in this Marxist mindset that he has. And why in the world are we bringing all of this up? Because it's part of the last days apostasy of the church. I mean, the Church of England, was it? Can't define a woman. And here's the evangelical industrial complex sort of sounding like something that you get from the Democratic Party. And they're not, they're saying that 4th of July is idolatry. Here's a slide here that says the divine institutions. These are the institutions which God himself has established for the purpose of holding back evil in a fallen world. Those are conscience, marriage and the family, labor, government, and nationalism. What's wrong with celebrating the 4th of July? Why would you call it idolatry when all you're doing is celebrating the 5th divine institution?
Exactly.
Nationalism. And isn't our purpose in human history, Brother Jim, to glorify God?
Yes.
What's wrong with going back into American history and seeing the ways that God has worked in our society to give us the most prosperous, free civilization in human history?
Yes.
Why can't that be seen? I preached a two-parter on the 7 principles that made America great, dealing with that issue. I put it under the category of glorifying God.
Yes.
Tim Keller, coming from this Frankfurt school, puts it under the category of idolatry.
Yes.
And by the way, what's wrong with calling America a Christian nation? One of the things Keller and this group of elites is promoting is America never was a Christian nation. I guess they've never read the case, the Church of the Holy Trinity versus the United States, 1892, where the court cited 87 historical precedents, beginning with Christopher Columbus, and concluded in a unanimous, not a narrow decision, a unanimous decision that America was founded as a Christian nation. In fact, this case dealt with an immigration law preventing a church in New York from hiring a pastor from across the pond in Europe to be their pastor. That transaction, I guess, ran afoul of an immigration law. And the court said you can't have a law that discriminates against a church and a pastor like the way you're applying it.
Right.
That couldn't have been the original intent of the law because we're a Christian nation.
Yeah.
The majority opinion written by Justice David Josiah Brewer remind us of his conclusion.
All right, here's his conclusion. This is historically true from the discovery of this continent to the present hour. There is a single voice making this affirmation. These are not the sayings, declarations of private persons. They are organic utterances. They speak the voice of the entire people. These and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation.
So here is Tim Keller and company, evangelical leads, denying we were ever a Christian nation.
Yeah.
And here they are calling one of the great institutions, the institution of nationalism, idolatry.
Yeah.
And here they are espousing ideas and doctrines that you'd find in the Democratic platform or Democratic National Committee. Can't you put this under the category of the last days apostasy of the church, right alongside the Church of England that wants to say we don't even know what a woman is? There's no definition of a woman. You were going to say something.
The only thing I would add to this is as I look back at the article, it mentions the fact that Keller is repackaging Marxism for a Christian audience. Is that not a great definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Amen to that. Something we're warned about over and over again. Let's get to this last category. This is number 6. This has to deal with global persecution. And like all of these other signs, we see it as primarily in the tribulation period, but it's accelerating now.
Oh, yes.
What did Jesus predict in Matthew 24, verses 9 and 10?
Matthew 24, 9 and 10, then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another.
Now, here is an article that came to my attention from Rachel Bunyan, July the 9th, 2022. It says, Christian mechanic is sentenced to death.
Bicycle mechanic.
Yes. For blasphemy in Pakistan after he argued with a customer who demanded a discount for being a devoted Muslim. So a Muslim comes in and says, hey, give me a discount for your services because I am a Muslim. And the guy basically says, I'm not going to give you a discount for that. I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. So for that, he runs afoul of some blasphemy law. Right. He finds himself in prison for 5 years.
Without a trial.
Without a trial, and now he's been sentenced to death?
Yeah.
What kind of insanity is this?
Yeah.
Would you mind reading this? This is a lengthy article, so I'm going to probably interrupt you at a particular point, but I just want to get on the table what's happening with this particular individual.
A Christian mechanic has been sentenced to death for blasphemy in Pakistan after he was found guilty of insulting the Prophet Muhammad by saying that Jesus Christ is the true prophet. Asfaq Masih, 34, was arrested in 2017 after he got into a verbal disagreement with a Muslim customer at his motorbike repair shop in Lahore after the man refused to pay his bill.
Wow.
The customer had asked for a waiver on the grounds that he was a religious devotee, but Masih refused the request, saying he believed in Jesus Christ and wasn't interested in the man's religious status as a Muslim. Masih was accused of disrespecting the Prophet Muhammad and arrested after he allegedly said that for Christians, Jesus was the true prophet. 5 years after his arrest, Masih, who has a wife and daughter, was on Monday sentenced to death by a Lahore court. His older brother, Mahmoud Masih, said that their family was reduced to tears following the judgment, saying that it feels like the end of the world for them. Under Pakistan's blasphemy laws, anyone found guilty of insulting the religion or religious figures can be sentenced to death. In court, Masih insisted he was innocent of the charges and that the case against him was baseless, false, and frivolous. He also said the accusation against him was made by a rival who wanted to destroy his motorbike repair business. Quoting him here, he says, "I insisted for my bill, and he said that I don't follow anyone other than Jesus, and so wasn't interested in the man's religious status." Masih has been in prison for 5 years awaiting his conviction due to a series of adjournments. His mother died in 2019 while he was behind bars. Nasir Saeed, the director of the Center for Legal Aid Assistance and Settlement, a charity which supports persecuted Christians in Pakistan, said in a statement, "The judgment was abhorrent." He said, quoting, "I don't remember any case where the lower court decided to grant bail or freed anyone accused of the blasphemy law. The judges are aware that such cases are made to punish and settle personal grudges with the opponents, especially against the Christians." Again quoting, "Because of pressure from the Islamic groups, lower courts judges are always hesitant to free the victims, but make popular decisions to save their skin and shift their burden to the high court. He is innocent and has already spent 5 years in prison for a crime he never committed."
And just for the sake of time, we can stop reading there. But I hope people will go to andywoodsministries.org and sign up on the homepage for the newsletter.
Yes.
There's a very easy way to do that, as you'll see on the homepage. And all of our show notes, every time we post a new show, will show up in your inbox, and you'll see the link to this article. I hope you get it and you download it and you read it in your entirety, in its entirety, because it goes on and it says a number of people have been sentenced to death in Pakistan for blasphemy. It talks about other cases like this.
Mm-hmm.
And cases going on in similar countries all over the world.
Yeah.
These blasphemy laws are being used to put Christians in prison.
Right.
A lot of times by rivals,
Mm-hmm.
rivals in business.
Exactly.
Or maybe someone, likes your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's have the husband, put away on blasphemy charges so I can have access to his wife or his business or his bank account, or so I can drive him out of business so my business can flourish without competition. They're going so far as to looking at people's texts, to looking at possible blasphemy against Muhammad. They're looking at an app that people use called WhatsApp,
mm-hmm.
which allows you to communicate. I use it myself when I travel internationally, and people are looking at that particular app to see if there's anything on there that might be construed as derogatory towards Islam, and Christians are being sentenced to death because of these blasphemy laws, so-called blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest with you, Brother Jim, this last story that we're including here is the saddest. In fact, I put all of this material together yesterday, and I literally tossed and turned all night long thinking about this poor man.
Yeah.
And I think the Lord was sort of agitating me to pray for this man, because I really don't know what else to do for our precious brothers and sisters that find themselves in these circumstances.
And I'll just very quickly add, we didn't read this portion of the article, but there you want to get it and read it, because it talks about this young lady who thought she had a friend and texted her friend, and her friend then turned her in for blasphemy.
Wow.
And doesn't this go right back to what we were reading here in the scriptures a minute ago?
Yes.
That, everyone's going to turn on everyone.
And that's why we're bringing it up. Jesus said this would happen.
Yeah.
Again, Matthew 24:9-10, they will deliver you to tribulation, will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. Yeah. At that time, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another. Now that we take that as a tribulation passage, but the world is sort of in warm-up mode for this trend reaching its zenith in the tribulation. So that's our prophecy update for today. Israel, GOG-MAGOG, New World Order, inflation, apostasy, and global persecution. We like to end on a high note because a lot of these details, even me, just putting this together, the weight of it all is just so overwhelming. Yeah. So we have to, factor in that we're on the winning side of history.
That's right.
And what does Titus 2:13 say?
Titus 2:13, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus.
So we have a blessed hope, the appearing of Jesus, and people can enter into a right relationship with Jesus by placing their personal faith concerning their sin debt and the safekeeping of their soul, a problem they can't resolve, into Jesus Christ.
Right.
And once they do that, and that by itself, they're saved.
That's it.
And they're now on the winning side of human history. So we like to end on that note, or else seeing all this bad news without the good news is just a crushing burden that I don't think a human being can fully bear, other than Jesus himself.
Amen.
Remind you to follow us in podcast format. Just go to where you get your podcasts, go to the search engine, and type in Andy Woods or Pastor's Point of View or Andy Woods Pastor's Point of View, something like that into your search engine, and this will show up in podcast format. Follow us on Rumble. We post these on YouTube, but also Rumble. And if you want to help us financially, people ask how to do that other than just to give to us, which we always appreciate, is you can donate to Andy Woods Ministries by just going to andywoodsministries.org, and there's a way to donate if the Lord leads you to do that. And if the Lord doesn't lead you to do that, we're not interested in your financial help. We know that what God orders, he pays for.
That's true.
And God has been very faithful with all of our expenses. Every ministry has expenses. We have our expenses here at Sugarland Bible Church and also Andy Woods Ministries, and we appreciate the generosity of God's people that help us.
Amen. We
don't make money an issue, but a lot of people have been blessed by the ministry, and they want to know how to give back. And so those are ways to do it. You can also help us by just putting Andy Woods Ministries as part of Amazon Smile. So whenever you buy something on Amazon, it helps part of the proceeds go to us. The newsletter I won't tell you about again since I told you about that earlier. And any closing thoughts, Brother Jim?
I would just say when we have these programs, I hope you're encouraged to pray for these situations, and in this instance, pray for these individuals that are being persecuted for their Christian faith.
Yeah,
prayer is powerful.
Yep, and we should be concerned. But at the same time, it's fitting into a prophetic picture that God told us about thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Well, with all of that being said, we're going to sign off for today. Thank you for watching Pastor's Point of View, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.
God bless.